All right, this is Just Hold On, Finding Hope in the Face of Suicide by Denise Haas, a.k.a. Big D. What is this book about? I awoke this morning to yet another person who took her own life. She was a young girl, a teenager. I don't know why she did it, but I'm sure that in the midst of her anguish, she believed the lie that there was no other option. I'm equally sure that the questions left in the minds of her friends and family will lead to grief beyond imagination. As a result of her suicide, some of those left behind will consider suicide themselves. Some will live a life that is barely living, and still some will go on to try to help others through their own nightmare of losing someone to suicide. What do you say to someone who is suicidal? What can we possibly say to a mom whose tears are permanently flowing because of the death of her son? How can we help a dad who weeps uncontrollably over the memory of his daughter, even 6 years after that tragic day when his whole world was turned upside down? This book is not a cure-all, but I have no doubt in my mind that the things written in this book will help some, save others, and for many, prayerfully, this book will give them just enough hope to hold on. I don't have a degree in psychology, and I won't pretend to know everything there is to know about suicide, but I will tell you that I've experienced it on a very personal level. Much of my teenage years were filled with contemplating suicide, which resulted in several attempts to take my own life. I've also interviewed several people for this book, and what they said can be used as an invaluable resource for even the most uninformed among us. If you're grieving the loss of a loved one, or you would just like to know what you can do in this fight against suicide, then this book would be a great place to start. If you're contemplating suicide, considering it as a solution to the problems you're facing, I challenge you to continue reading. I've been right where you are, and what you are considering has grave, pun intended, and unintended consequences that you may not be aware of. Whenever we enter into an agreement, many times we're signing up for something we aren't expecting. It's called the fine print. I wrote this book to help you see some of the fine print of your decision. Thanks in advance for taking the time to read what I've written. I'm praying for you to see the truth. Introduction and a note to the mental health and suicide prevention community. I know you care about people, especially those who are vulnerable to depression and suicide. Some of you have made suicide prevention your life's work, or at least a very large part of it. Your passion is to save lives. To say that we don't understand the subject of suicide is an understatement. To say anyone understands it fully is to be completely deceived. We only know what we believe through the lens of our own personal experience and what we've been taught. Perhaps no exact solution will work for all people because no two people are the same. However, since that's the case, I'm asking you to be open to what you read in this book. What worked for me may not work for others, but it just might work for someone. So that makes it worthwhile. You may not agree with all of my conclusions. I only ask that you give this book a chance because it may actually help someone to choose life. I'm not pushing a religion or promoting a certain church, but among other things, I am trying to open the door for those who are hurting to consider God as an alternative to suicide. So before you throw out the baby, this book, with the bathwater, with its spiritual references, please consider that it might help just one person to choose life instead of death. Not everything written in this book is about God, but He's the only reason I'm alive today. So I must be truthful and not deny Him. Whatever the case, as long as we keep our hearts right, sincere, and not judgmental, our words will carry some amount of life and hope to everyone. Let's join together to do everything we possibly can to defeat this enemy of suicide, one life at a time, using any and all tools at our disposal. Thanks for not giving up on those who are struggling to just hold on. Grateful acknowledgments. There were two groups of people that I interviewed for this book: those who are grieving the loss of a loved one to suicide, and those who had attempted suicide. I'm extremely grateful to these who took valuable time out of their busy lives to do these interviews. I want to express my deepest thanks. To the grieving, for all of you whose wounds have been unavoidably opened by this interviewing process, you have my eternal thanks. To those who have attempted suicide, your perspectives are invaluable and will no doubt help those who don't understand the raw power and almost involuntary forward motion of a suicidal thought. Your insights will prove to be a ray of hope to some and an education to others. Thank you. Together, these interviewees are my co-writers, so to speak. May you be rewarded in 1,000 ways in your life and in the lives of many others because of your contribution to this book. Look for the interviewee's wisdom whenever you see from the interviews. A note of thanks to my editor, Martha De Palma. It's not easy to fine-tune another person's creative work. It takes finesse, patience, and a certain amount of sensitivity to work with the sensitivities of a writer. Somehow, time and time again, Martha has continued to find that balance with me. I didn't take all of her advice, so please don't judge her editing abilities by this book alone. If there are grammatical errors or sentence structures that don't seem too structurally sound, that's on me. There were certain things I just wouldn't bend on, rules of English notwithstanding. Even beyond the editing, though, Martha is my mentor, friend, and sister in Christ. May the Lord bless you, Martha, for doing what he has called you to do in his kingdom. With all the thousands of lives you've already touched, I don't think you've even scratched the surface of the amazing ways God is going to use you in the future. Shalom, dear sister, and thank you. Thank you for your support. I'm extremely grateful to those who have contributed to this book both financially and spiritually through prayer. Because anonymity is often a characteristic of humble people. I know you wouldn't want me to name you, but you know who you are. It's quite obvious to me that I couldn't have finished this work without your support. Thank you. A shout out to my husband, Kurt. Through your wisdom and patience, you have helped to make my first book writing experience a pleasant one. I can't thank you enough for your support. Life with you just keeps getting better and better. I love you, and good night. Of course, I also want to acknowledge and thank Jesus for his clear leading in this entire writing process. Writing a book can be a daunting prospect, but I have felt God's hand guiding me every step of the way. There are a few things in my life that I've been completely sure that the Lord has been leading, and this book is one of those things. For that reason alone, I know God will speak to people through it, and many who are weary will have an encounter with their Creator because of it. The idea that God would use me, the foolish things of the world and the base things and the despised, 1 Corinthians 1:27, to bring glory to his name through a book is both humbling and exciting at the same time. I'm grateful that so many years ago, Jesus rescued me, and now my story has become his story. I am fully his for the fullness of time and eternity. I thank Jesus for this work and leave the results of this book to him. This book is dedicated to the weary ones. May the words on these pages sustain you to just hold on. The Lord God has given me the tongue of disciples that I may know how to sustain the weary one with the word. Isaiah 50, verse 4. Part 1. To those who are contemplating suicide. If you're contemplating suicide today, this book is for you. If you feel like you've already made up your mind, please keep reading. Some say that suicide is a selfish and cowardly act, but I disagree. If you've picked up this book, then I believe there is a strength in you that calls you to live, and you are meant to read it. Be courageous and read the whole thing. If you read this entire book and end up with questions or doubts about your initial choice to take your life, please email me at dhazbigd@gmail.com. I will respond as quickly as is humanly possible. Don't make a permanent decision based on temporary feelings, even if you've had those feelings for years. You are the reason I've written this book. You are valuable and worth every effort that it took for me to get these truths down on paper. No matter what you've done, let me say that again. No matter what you've done or haven't done, you have not gone too far. As long as you're breathing, there is hope for you. Just hold on for one more second, just one more minute, just one more hour. Just hold on for one more sunrise, one more time to open your eyes to blue skies and hope and love and the warmth of the sun. Just let your lungs keep breathing and please just hold on. We begin with 5 really good reasons not to take your own life. Really good reason not to take your own life. Number 1, collateral damage. People. It's extremely interesting to me that the people that I interviewed who had attempted suicide said that they were not thinking about what their death would do to their family and friends. Only one person said that she was glad she didn't succeed because that would have devastated her children. She wrote, "They would have never recovered from my suicide." On the other hand, 100% of the grieving people that I interviewed were devastated by the death of their loved one. Some are still grieving several years after that horrific event. If you've not thought of it before, here's an example of what your suicide will do to your family, friends, and even complete strangers. The following portrayal is from the perspective of a grown woman whose older brother committed suicide when she was 7 years old. Dear reader, the following is a very harsh piece of writing intended to reach those who are contemplating suicide right now. If you are grieving the loss of a loved one to suicide, please skip "Suicide ruined my life." Please skip this part. Suicide ruined my life. The day you left was a day I will never forget. It's with me wherever I go, and I can't escape it. The day you left. I don't sleep much. I'm not very hungry. Just sort of exist from day to day because the day is always the same. It's the day you left. I feel so empty, except for the guilt that fills me up. People tell me all the time that time will heal this pain, but I don't see how. When I close my eyes, I see you ending your life. I see your face, and I wonder, did you think about me at all on the day you threw your life away? Every time I see a new life, a flower, or hear a baby cry, I'm reminded that you are not alive, and you never will be again. The day you threw your life away left a permanent and deep scar on my life and on the way I look at things. My life is filled with questions now that I never would have thought of before that day. I'm lost and alone and hurt by your decision to throw your life away. I'm never sure of myself or confident in any relationships that I have. The day you went to the grave, you took with you my innocence and trust, and in return gave me confusion, anger, and bitterness. I always looked up to you, thought I knew you, thought you loved me, but then, without even saying goodbye, you were gone. Gone forever. Your decision to end your life has very much redefined mine. I have only this tragedy to remember you by as it replays in my mind day after day. I've had years of therapy and drugs to help with my illness that I got the day you left, but nothing seems to help. I can't seem to make sense of it. Did you even think of what your suicide would do to a 7-year-old? Why did you do it? It's the question that haunts my mind all my waking hours. I miss you so much. Even after all these years, I'm still reliving the guilt of not being there for you. I know I was only your little sister, but you didn't even give me a chance to help. So how is it being dead? Is it better? Are you happy? Was it worth it? That day you threw your life and mine away? I hope so, because it sure didn't help me any. I won't ever be happy. I will always remember the day you threw your life away because I can't escape it. I can't get free of it. It won't let me go. Suicide ruined my life, and I'll never be the same. If you're considering suicide, I beg you to think of those you will leave behind, the collateral damage, if you will. I'm your brother, your mother, your best friend, your teacher, your sister, grandma, husband, your next-door neighbor, your niece, your son. We're the ones you will leave behind to pick up the pieces. If you're successful, you will put us in an impossible position. No one will be comforted. There won't be any words to describe the constant ache in the deepest part of our being. We won't be able to explain it to the kids. We'll keep it to ourselves. But we will be in agony every day, wondering if we could have said or done anything differently. You will leave us with a new sort of self-condemnation by which we will filter some of our decisions. We all love you, can't you see that? Do you really want to leave us with an agonizing, guilt-ridden memory of your suicide? If suicide takes your life, be assured that it will ruin our lives too. Have you considered that the children might follow your example to the grave? In your pain, you think you're doing us a favor, but your death will have the exact opposite effect on our lives. Make no mistake, your suicide will ruin our lives and will never be the same. So please, just hold on for one more second, just one more minute, just one more hour. From the interviews. Think you don't matter? The following statements were gathered from interviews I conducted with those who are grieving the loss of a loved one to suicide. A life of grief in their own words, because just surviving is a far cry from living. Here was the question I asked those who grieve the loss of a loved one to suicide. If you could say anything to your loved one, what would it be? Helen, who lost her son, would say, "Why?" Jerry, who lost 2 of her sons to suicide in the span of 5 years, would say, I would holler at them, "Why did you do this to me?" Tony, who lost her brother, would say, "I wish that in the last moments of your life on this earth, you would have seen the impact of your actions on all who loved you. I believe that if you had a moment of clarity through your pain, addictions, and anger, you would have made a very different series of decisions that day. I know that you know just how much I loved you, and that my efforts to hold you accountable for your actions were part of my love. Carol, who lost her son, would say, I love you. April, who lost her son, would say, I'm sorry. Pat, who lost his sister, would say, I miss you, but I know you're not in pain. You're not hurting anymore. Sue, who lost her son, would say, I'm sorry. I didn't know things were so bad for you. Carrie, who lost her sister, would say, I love you and I miss you. Kim, who lost her husband, would say, I didn't want you to go. We would have had a tough time, but we could have gotten through it together. From the interviews. Below are statements from the people who have lost a loved one to suicide. In answer to my question, if someone was standing before you right now saying they wanted to take their own life, what would you say to them? If you are contemplating suicide, here's what the grieving families are saying directly to you in their own words. Don't do it. You really don't want to die, do you? You just want the pain to stop. I can help you stop it. No one is better off without you. Just ask Mom. It's temporary at this moment. Life is full of pain, but we get through it. Don't even think about it. Please don't. You can't. You just can't do this to your family. They will never be the same. So many people care about you. People love you. Please, let's talk about this. Why? There is a way out. Please, we can find a solution. Think about your family. The only hope you have is Jesus. He can be your life. Only Jesus can lift you out of your darkness. Really good reason not to take your own life. Number 2, there are worse things than dying. Living with the consequences of attempted suicide. Not everyone who attempts suicide will succeed. According to some studies, approximately 92 to 95% of attempts will end in survival. Survival doesn't mean there are no consequences, though. Quite the contrary. The attempt may not take your life, but it can definitely compromise the quality of your remaining life. I have heard stories of people who have attempted suicide through heinous means and have not succeeded in dying. For example, there are stories of men and women who have jumped off bridges, but did not die. Instead, they are paralyzed and must be cared for the rest of their days on this earth. There are those who have tried to shoot themselves, who now have to live with deformities and endure painful surgeries. There are those who have taken poisons and are now brain damaged with the inability to speak, walk, or reason. Now, all these methods may have worked for others, but by God's sovereign will, they did not succeed in those whose time was not yet up. Still, in these cases, the unsuccessful suicide attempt has irrevocably altered life as they know it. Surviving the attempt. According to one source, the Skyway Bridge in St. Petersburg, Florida, is one of the most used bridges for suicide in the nation. People who make the jump hit the water in approximately 3.5 seconds, going about 75 miles per hour. The impact typically breaks bones and ruptures organs. Even if the impact doesn't kill them, people are knocked unconscious and drown. Over the last decade, the Tampa Bay Times has interviewed 2 people who survived the jump. Both said they regretted the decision to jump just before they hit the water. The impact was so violent that it ripped off their clothes. One survivor, whose bowels were ruptured and back broken, described the feeling like crashing through a wooden deck. A nearby boater rescued her. The other survivor suffered a collapsed lung, broken ribs, ruptured spleen, and a fractured vertebrae in his neck. He swam to nearby rocks and was rescued. So we see that there really are worse things than dying. Ultimately, all life is in God's hands. He wants you to live, and so do I. Please don't try to take your life. Just hold on. The sun will shine again for you. It did for me. Really good reason not to take your own life. Number 3, you are worth it and you matter. One of the prevailing thoughts in the mind of a depressed or suicidal person is the idea that they are worth less. In my interviews with people who attempted suicide, worthlessness was a consistent theme that ran through their lives. If I were to ask you right now what you think you are worth, what would you say? Not much, a little, That depends on who you ask. I don't really know, etc. The problem with those kinds of answers is that they are usually, if not always, based upon the opinion and valuation of another person. Here's the thing. Every human being, male and female, was made in the image of God, Genesis 1:27. For that reason alone, each one of us has intrinsic value. The Bible says in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10, that we are his, God's, workmanship. Another version says that we are his masterpiece. You may not feel like it, look like it, or act like an invaluable masterpiece of God, but true is true. You are. So even if no one on the earth loved you, and that just isn't possible, someone loves you, you would still be worth every effort that God made to save you. You may have heard that old saying, God don't make no junk. And that is so right. Our value as human beings is not based on how much money we make or how good looking we are, where we live, how well we can sing, dance, paint, or write, or what anyone has said about us. No, our worth is set in stone to be at the highest valuation because of whose image we were made in. You can't get more valuable than being made in the image of God for the purpose of God. From the interviews. Here is some advice from those who have attempted suicide. Please take it to heart. These people have been right where you are. The question I asked them was, if someone was standing before you right now, saying they wanted to take their own life, what would you say to them? Christina, author, musician, and minister, would say, you're beautiful and you're one of a kind. God has a purpose for you, and your life is not an accident. Brian, minister, he says, let's talk. Hold on one more day. Stay with me. Mary, high school teacher, it really does get better. I know you can't see past this moment. I will sit with you. I will stay with you. Lauren said, tomorrow will be better. Keep saying it until it happens. No matter what, you matter. So I'll ask you again, what are you worth? If your answer is based on God's view of you, then you've hit the nail on the head. No matter what anyone has said to you, no matter how much you've been kicked around or made fun of, no matter how many times you've failed or sinned or tried to do better, no matter what evil you have seen or lies you have heard, no matter what you've come to believe, you will never be worth less than what God has made you to be. You are nothing less than God's masterpiece, and you matter. Jesus is speaking in Matthew 6, verses 25 through 27. Jesus says this, for this reason I say to you, do not be worried about your life as to what you will eat or what you will drink, nor for your body as to what you will put on. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air, that they do not sow, nor reap, nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not worth much more than they? And who of you by being worried can add a single hour to his life? Understanding your worth to God is a tangible truth that can help you to just hold on. Really good reason not to take your own life. Number 4, suicide is contagious. It's a horrifying thing to think that your 4-year-old little brother or sister would grow up wanting to be just like their big brother who took his life. As humans, we are prone to suggestion. Suggestion can be so compelling that we actually have a phrase for it, the power of suggestion. Advertisers know it works, and they use the power of suggestion to sell their products. But even advertisers know that the personal recommendation of another, word of mouth, is the most effective way to get people to buy what they're selling. Every day we are leading and suggesting through our words and our actions. Here's a lighthearted, sweet story that gets my point across on a very basic level. The power of suggestion. Just the other day, I was driving to Walmart. First, a little background. After like 35 years of eating very unhealthily, I have turned over a new leaf in the past few months. I have been on a self-imposed, customized, live it, not diet, composed of carrot juice, meat, fruit, and vegetables. As a practice, I try not to eat bread, chips, candy bars, or fast food anymore. Okay, back to the sweet story. So there I was, waiting to make my turn onto the highway when this guy turned onto the street right in front of me. He was a stranger, but what he was doing would drive me to go off the reservation. Food-wise, that is. As he made his turn, time slowed down long enough for me to see that he was eating an ice cream cone from Dairy Queen. The moment was like one of those model commercials where their hair's blowing in the breeze and everything is in slow motion. It was a split-second glance and I was toast. Oh, I said to myself out loud, I will get an ice cream cone on my way home today. There's so much power in suggestion that I'm almost positive that if you're still reading this, you are also going to get an ice cream cone this very day. I apologize if I have ruined your diet. It was not my intention. However, I pretty much knew if I wrote down my experience, you would be sucked into my world. No doubt as I drove home that day, eating my chocolate cone and making my turn into that same street, someone else was watching me. I looked like a model with my hair blowing in the breeze. And boom, another customer for Dairy Queen. Now, I'm not trying to make light of your situation. I'm just showing you that if our example has that much power in the little things like an ice cream cone, how much more power will it have on these matters of life and death? I'm telling you, suicide is contagious. You don't want to spread that disease, do you? I know you don't. Besides, if bad life choices are contagious, then so could your choice to just hold on, become a real lifesaver to someone else. Really good reason not to take your own life. Number 5. Hell is a real place. Have you considered the reality of hell? To be honest, I really don't know if a person who commits suicide will go to hell. I only know that I had a fear of going there when I was contemplating suicide back in my teenage days. That fear of going to hell actually helped me for many years not to make a serious attempt at taking my own life. I think that since it's such a serious question and nobody has a definitive answer on it, we should probably not test it out. So please, just hold on, because eternity is a very long time. Now you may be thinking those 5 reasons not to take my own life were pretty good. But what do I do with all of this depression? Well, let's talk about why you could be depressed in the first place. Cause, effect, and real-life solutions. This section is chock full of opinions. It is not intended to be a clinical assessment, medical advice, or college-level psychology. This is just me sharing opinions that have been born out of raw life experience, common sense, and real-life solutions that have worked for me. I apologize in advance if I make you angry. It's certainly not my intention, but for some it will be an unavoidable result. Keep reading. If, as many say, depression is to blame for suicide, then the causes of depression should be explored. In this next section, we will consider some of the possible reasons for depression, and we will also consider real-life solutions to the problems of anxiety and depression. Why am I depressed? Help! Could the cause of this depression be physical? Poor nutrition, food. I've learned, only recently, that our psyche is seriously affected by deficiencies in nutrition. I don't mean that our first choice should be to pop a Flintstone vitamin to fix that problem, but more like eat some meat for your brain, or eat 5 apples for energy, or whatever. What if various nutritious foods could relieve some of your depression? I mean, it's worth the time to look at the possibility, right? Lack of sleep. Sleep is the coolest thing ever, when you think about it. God has placed an automatic shutdown on the human body after a specific period of time every day. Our bodies will be in charging mode for 6 to 8 hours in order to reboot our brains and bodies. God is effectively putting us to sleep every night for our own good. Isn't that amazing? Because these bodies were made to need sleep. When we don't get enough of it, we start to short circuit. Not getting enough rest can be a real downer. Your poor sleep patterns might be the culprit for physical exhaustion and a lack of motivation. Think about the meltdown your cell phone has if you don't charge it. It's all crazy for a time, beeping and vibrating to warn you of imminent shutdown. If you try to ignore these warnings, the phone will eventually shut itself down. The only way to turn it back on is to charge it. It's the same thing with our brains. Being the complicated computers that they are, they need to be recharged every day in order to function properly. Take a nap or go to bed early. Hey, it might help. Lack of water. I haven't always respected water, but as I've seen the serious effects of dehydration, I can appreciate the role that water plays in our physical and mental health. I'm sure you know this, but human beings are made up of 60% water. Some of these symptoms of dehydration are irritability, confusion, tiredness, low blood pressure, and sunken eyes. In severe cases, dehydration can cause delirium or unconsciousness. On the other hand, the benefits of water are fabulous. Among many other things, water in the human body acts as a shock absorber for the spinal cord and brain, and it lubricates joints. The brain also uses water to manufacture hormones and neurotransmitters, and water helps to deliver oxygen all over the body. You do see how a lack of water will greatly compromise our mental health, right? Your depression could be caused, at least in part, by a lack of water. Easy fix. Come to think of it, I'm kind of thirsty and a little bit confused at the moment. I think I'll go get a glass of water. And that concludes our 30-minute reading.